Okay. Shalom. Uh, our topic for today is about the Sabbath. And Sabbath was known as resting in the grace of God. And our reading can be seen in Genesis chapter 2, from creation chapter 2, from verse 1 hanggang 3. Okay. Thus the heaven and the earth were finished, in all the host of them. By the seventh day God completed his work, which he had done. And he rested on the seventh day from all his works which he had done. And then God blessed the Sabbath, seventh day, and sanctified it, because in it he had rested from all his works which God created and made. So what is the Sabbath all about? So Sabbath was established by God. Sabbath was established by God at creation. So wala pa ang tao. Nilalang na ng Diyos ang Sabbath. Sabbath is connected with God's rest because after his creation, on the seventh day, he rested. So the Sabbath is at the end of the work. So Sabbath must proceed by work. So you work and then you rest. Sabbath is in the seventh day of the creation week. And God blessed and sanctified, meaning he set apart the Sabbath. So the week or the 7-day period is established directly by God. It's not governed by the sun or the moon. And the week is a revelation of how God acts. That means work brings rest. Kaya hindi rest and then work. So work muna, then will lead to rest. So the week, yung isang linggo, is a period of 7, sets the pattern for all God's work. Thus the number 7 is in the Bible. And the week is seen in the sabbatical year, the so-called Shemitah. And in the Jubilee year, in the year of Jubel. So ito yung Shemitah every 7th year. And after 49th years, on the 50th day, is Jubilee. Matasabog din natin itong rest. So ultimately, the week is seen as a pattern for the universe. 6 days of history, 7th day of the millennium, 8th day is eternity. So ito yung pattern ng Diyos, yung week na ito, para sa kanyang creation. So 6 days of work have the Sabbath as their goal. And the week is a miniature, a picture of God's whole plan of redemption, because on the 7th day, meaning, and that is the millennium, that's everybody will come to rest. So the Sabbath pictures the rest that God has prepared for completion of His work in redeeming mankind. Kaya natatapos yung redemption on the 7th 1,000 years of the Lord. Kaya ang mundo matatapos sa 6,000 years. At sa ika-7,000 years, millennium, pahinga na yon. Ibig sabihin, natapos na ng Diyos ang kanyang work. So the redemptive work of God is sure because He finishes His work. Nung magpahinga ang Panginoon, so in connection with the redemption, ibig sabihin, sure talaga yung redemption. Dahil namahinga siya eh. And actually, the major part of God's work is the redemption. Yung redemption niya, nag-work siya for the whole 6,000 years. Kaya puro work. And the Lord said, God bless the Sabbath. What is meant by God bless the Sabbath? No other day is blessed. So, yes, Sabbath day is a unique, its blessing, as a foreshadow of eternal rest. So the Sabbath carries with it a continual blessing, pointing to final salvation. That is a Sabbath. So, another is, Sabbath is sanctified. God sanctified the Sabbath. When God said He sanctified the Sabbath, means He set apart. He set apart from the rest of the days. But means the Sabbath is not set apart from the other 6 days of work. So when we set the Sabbath apart from the other 6 days, we are living out the principle of God's way of rest. And He works, accomplishes rest. So kapag ginaya natin yung pattern ng Panginoon, that we're resting on the 7th day, means we're following God's pattern of work. And then, expect the blessing because you're following that pattern. So when we set the Sabbath apart, we proclaim the truth that God has finished His work. And that therefore the Sabbath rest, meaning is secured. So when we believe in the Sabbath, meaning we believe also that we have time to rest with God. When you don't believe in the Sabbath, means you will continue to work and to work and to work, meaning wala nang kapahingahan. So the Sabbath is sanctified by God, even it is desecrated by man. Because mankind desecrated the Sabbath. So in Exodus 16 verse 4 up to 5, then the Lord said to Moses, behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I might test them, whether or not they will walk in my ways, instruction of the Torah. So on the 6 days, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much they gather daily. So what is the passage all about? Sabbath is a test of faith. Kung sinasabi natin lahat na mayroon tayong faith, pero nag-fail tayo sa Sabbath, that is not true faith. True faith must include the belief on the Sabbath, resting on the Sabbath day. So in Exodus 16:22, now on the 6 days, they gathered twice as much bread and 2 omers for each one. When all the leaders of the congregation came and told Moses, then he said to them, this is what the Lord meant. Tomorrow is Sabbath observance, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you will bake, and boil what you will boil. And all that is left over, put aside to be kept until morning. So they put it aside until morning, as Moses had ordered. And it did not become foul, nor there were any worm in it. And Moses said, eat it today, for today is a Sabbath for the Lord. Today you will not find it in the field. So 6 days you shall gather it, but on the 7th day, the Sabbath, there will be none. So it came about on the 7th day that some of the people went out to gather, but they found none. Then the Lord said to Moses, how long do you refuse to keep my commandments and my instruction? See, the Lord has given you the Sabbath, therefore He gives you bread for 2 days. On the 6 days, remain every man in his place. Let no man go out of his place. On the 7th day, so the people rested on the 7th day. So what happened is, on the 6 days, they gathered twice manna. Dahil ang sabi ng Panginoon, wala kayong mapupulot sa Sabat. Pero mayroong lumabas pa rin. Lumabas pa rin at nanguha, pero wala na sila makuha. Ang miracle dito ng Sabat is, pag nagtira sila ng mana for the next day, nabubulok. Pero yung ginather nila on the 6 days, double portion, kahit magtira sila at kinain sa Sabat, hindi nabubulok. So, ibig sabihin na preserve yung manna on the 6th day. So, may miracle on Sabbath, ibig sabihin. Because God's rest yun eh. Pero, sabi nga, ay lumabas pa rin sila para mag-gather. So, ibig sabihin, kahit mag-gather ka na mag-gather, o magtrabaho ka na magtrabaho pag Sabbath, wala pa rin. Ang ibig sabihin yung the same. Ay di magpahinga ka na lang. At in principle, useless din kung magtrabaho ka ng Sabbath dahil the same pa rin. Ang problem, hindi ka nakapag-rest. Kaya mag-rest na lang. Kaya ang ginawa nila, hindi na sila nilumabas. So, why the Sabbath is a test? Because sanctifying the Sabbath is a matter of faith. On 6 days, the manna is spoiled if stored. Yet on the 6 days, one was to gather twice as much and stored it for the Sabbath. And the natural mind would think that it would spoil. But the Israelites had to trust God that they would have food on the Sabbath. Meaning, yung pagkain mo sa Sabbath, secured. Ang Diyos ang magpo-provide ng pagkain mo sa Sabbath. Yun ang kagandahan. Basta't nagtiwala ka sa Panginoon sa Sabbath, secured ang pagkain mo. Siya nag-guarantee. Yun ang miracle ng Sabbath. Hindi ka magugutom. So the Sabbath, therefore, is a test of one's willingness to trust God. If you want to trust God, the number one is Sabbath. Without trust in God's Sabbath, there will be no faith at all. So God has promised to supply our needs according to His riches and glory. And God has asked us to trust in Him and His abilities to supply our needs, not in our abilities. Kailangan kasama ang Diyos sa pagkatrabaho. Pag hindi kasama ang Diyos, wala. He is a good partner. So God's way of supplying our needs is sometimes contrary to our own way of thinking. But remember, there's always a miracle on the Sabbath. So when we obey God, we are demonstrating our willingness to trust in Him. So mahalaga na ang faith natin ay masusubok kung mayroon talaga tayong faith sa Kanya, kung nagsasaba tayo. That means those who claim to have faith in God, in the Messiah, but not resting on the Sabbath, that means he has no faith at all. Totoo, wala siya talagang faith. Doon pa lang makikita na kung talagang may faith siya. So anong klase ng faith natin yun? Idea lang. Hindi talaga yung faith na kagaya ng faith na sinasabi ng Panginoon sa Scripture. Now, another is, Sabbath is a sign. He is a covenant sign. So in Exodus 31, verse 16, up to 17, so the sons of Israel shall observe the Sabbath to celebrate the Sabbath throughout their generations as a perpetual covenant. It is a sign between me and the sons of Israel forever. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, but on the 7th day He ceased from labor and was refreshed. So why the Sabbath is a covenant sign? Because it requires that Israel have to trust God. It gives first to Israel the Sabbath as a sign of their covenant. That means if you are really Israel, you belong to God because you keep the Sabbath. So if you don't keep the Sabbath, you don't belong to God. You belong to other gods. Because Sabbath is very special because it is a sign that God gave us to His people Israel. So it requires that Israel submit to God. That means Israel should live according to His calendar. So it makes Israel distinct from the other nations when they keep the Sabbath, because the other nations are not celebrating the Sabbath. That keep Israel distinct from the rest of the world. That's why Israel was recognized as a chosen people. So how did God repress? Because Adonai said, you will be repressed on the Sabbath. Because he ceased from his labors of creation. And he affirmed what he had finished. And he rejoiced in the work of creation. So, ang ibig sabihin ng repress ay breath out. Hinihingahan. Ang nagsasabat, hinihingahan ng Diyos. At ang hininga ng Diyos, nung hininga niya si Adam and Eve galing sa lupa, nung hininga siya, naging tao. Anong ibig sabihin? Ibig sabihin, ang Sabat ay miracle talaga ng Diyos. Na ang Sabat ay nagdadagdag ng buhay. Ibig sabihin, dinadagdagan niya ang buhay natin. Kasi breath. And breath is life. So, the Sabbath is a covenant sign for all members of the covenant, including Gentiles. Because as a grafted in to the covenant, hindi tayo pwedeng gumawa ng sarili natin sign. Kung ano yung prescription ng Panginoon, yun ang mahalaga. Sabbath is a covenant sign for all members of the covenant. Israel is made up of the descendants of Jacob along with the Gentiles who have been grafted in to Israel through faith in Messiah. All who are true members of the covenant manifest their covenant identity through faithfulness to God, and that is by the Sabbath. Because covenant life is a life of faith. In Isaiah 56, verse 6 and 7, also the foreigners who join themselves to the Lord, meaning the non-Jewish foreigners, to minister to Him and to love the name of the Lord, to be His servants. Everyone who keeps from profaning the Sabbath and hold fast to my covenant, even then I will bring them to my holy mountain and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices will be acceptable at my altars. For my house will be called a house of prayer for all people. So Isaiah, the prophet, declared a long time ago that the Gentiles will also keep the Sabbath. Not only Israel. And the Lord said, according to the prophecy, those who love the Lord, those who really love the Lord and want to celebrate the Lord and to become His servant must keep the Sabbath. That means no way you can avoid the Sabbath. You cannot avoid the Sabbath as long as you want to serve God, because Sabbath is the required day to serve God. Hindi natin mababago yun. No? Kaya ang sabi na yung mga nagmamahal sa Diyos at gusto maglingkod sa Kanya, ang promise ay, even those I will bring them to my holy mountain, meaning in God's temple, and make them joyful in my house of prayer. And then all our offering will be acceptable to God. That means when you are keeping the Sabbath, that's the time na acceptable sa Panginoon ang mga ginagawa natin. Doon lang makakount. Ang offering natin, yung tithes and offering natin, yung love natin sa Diyos, yung pagsisilbi natin sa Panginoon, doon lang makakount pag nagsabat tayo. If you're doing this on Sunday, I tell you, that is not counted, because that is not the way the Lord said, no? And He said, foreigners who join themselves to the Lord must stop or must keep from profaning the Sabbath. Because if you continue to profane it, then your offering in your service is nothing. Even ano man ang ginagawa mo na paglilingkod sa Diyos at pinoprofane mo ang Sabbath ng Panginoon, so your service and everything is no value. You know what the Messiah said? Not all who called me Lord, Lord shall enter in the kingdom of heaven. In those days, sabi niya, Lord, many will say to me, Lord, did I not prophesy in your name? Meaning, nagturo siya. Did I cast out demon in your name? But I tell them, sabi niya, I never knew you. Keep away from me. Oh, get away from me. You evildoers. Why? Because they are profaning the Sabbath. That's why, Sabbath is very important. If you want to really please God, Sabbath is the day to serve God. Foreigners, sabi daw, who join themselves to the Lord are admonished to keep the Sabbath as the sign of the covenants of which they are members. So, in Mark chapter 2, verse 27, Yeshua said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. So Yeshua does not say that the Sabbath was made for the Jews. He never said that. He said, Sabbath was made for mankind. But, sabi niya, it was made for mankind, not for the Jews only. So this look forwards to the ingathering of the nations, and this is to anticipate the final redemption of mankind. Kaya sabi niya Sabbath was made for mankind, not mankind for the Sabbath. So ang ibig sabihin, ang Sabbath was given by God for the benefits of man. Okay? So, hindi yung Sabbath para sikilin ang tao, kundi para mag-benefits ang tao. So, therefore, the Sabbath is a covenant sign for all covenant members, whether native-born Jew or foreigners. Sabbath establishes that the work of salvation is God's work, and that He has accomplished everything necessary for the salvation of all who believe. So, in Isaiah 58, verse 13, Sabbath must be a delight. Delight. Hindi natutulog. No? Sabbath must be a delight. May joy. When you're celebrating the Sabbath, may joy. So, sabi sa Isaiah 58, verse 13, if because of the Sabbath, you turn your foot from doing your own pleasure on my holy day and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy day of the Lord, honorable, and honor it, desisting from your own ways, from seeking your own pleasure, and speaking your own word, then you will take delight in the Lord. And I will make you ride on the heights of the land, and feed you with the heritage of Jacob your father, for the mouth of Adonai has spoken. So what is the promise of the Lord for those who have delight in the Sabbath? Hindi yung darating dito, magsasabat, ay dito naman matutulog. Hindi ganun ang Sabbath. Ang Sabbath must be a delight. It's time to celebrate the goodness of the Lord. So, ang promise, sabi niya, all the provisions of the blessing and the covenant will be yours. Sabi niya, I will feed you with the heritage of your ancestor Jacob. For the mouth of the Lord has spoken. Meaning, guaranteed. Guaranteed yung blessing ng mga nagsasabat. Baligtad yung sinasabi ng iba na tinuruan namin na nag-alisan ng mga member nila dahil nagsabat na sila. Iba yon. Ibang usapan yon. Kasi hindi natin alam kung ano bang grupo nila. Pero dito, kasi napatunayan natin sa Israel, bakit blessing? Kasi hindi lamang sa Sabat Because Sabbath is just part of the teaching in the Torah. Kasi mayroong 7th day lang. Pero walang Torah. Iba yung buo ang covenant na pinapractice mo. So, we are not promoting the Seventh-day Adventists. We are promoting the Torah. Because the Sabbath is in the Torah. No? The covenant. So, what is the Sabbath? Honoring the Sabbath means honoring the Lord. Dishonoring the Sabbath, you dishonor God. So honoring the Sabbath, things to do. What is the things to do during the Sabbath? Turn your foot from your own pleasure. Rest from your own work. which means rest from your normal weekly work on the Sabbath day. So call the Sabbath a delight. Dapat ma-delight. That means you recognize the high value of God's covenant blessing. That in fact, God is the one who supplies all our needs. So honoring the Sabbath as a tangible expression of honoring God, which means openly acknowledging a trust in God to supply our needs. So honoring the Sabbath, not to do. What are not going to do? During the Sabbath, go your own way. Meaning, go on your pleasure. No, that is not. No, rather cease the normal labors of the week. I-stop mo dahil Sabbath. Seek your own pleasures. Rather, give the day over to God's agenda. Put your own agenda aside. Kaya, sa ating households, no business talk on Sabbath. So, in every conversation, we make sure that the Torah and Yeshua is the center of our discussion. So, we don't speak our own words. We speak on the words of the Messiah. So, our primary topic of conversation is about the Lord. Rather, we abstain or we stop our normal work. So God's word is our primary focus during the Sabbath. So blessing of God that comes from acknowledging Him in the Sabbath. That means you will delight in the Lord. Your appreciation for the Lord's faithfulness to you will increase. May faith na ako noon sa Panginoon, pero hindi naman ako nagsasabat. Hindi pa pala yun ang tunay na faith. Ang tunay na faith, pag nagmamanifest na sa iyo yung faith mo. And that is by keeping the Sabbath. You will delight in the Lord, meaning your appreciation for the Lord's faithfulness, you will increase. The Lord will bring personal success on you. As the Lord said, you will ride in the heights of the earth. That means the things that are eternal will be more and more characterized by your life. So you will personally understand the blessing that comes from obedience and the covenant blessing that was promised to Jacob, to Israel. So, for the mouth, sabi dito, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. What does it mean that? That means God has promised a blessing to those who obey Him. God's blessing are sure because He has promised them. According to Hebrew 4:9, sorry. So there remain a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For the one who has entered his rest has himself also rested from his work, as God did from his. Therefore, let us diligent to enter that rest, so that no one will fall through following the same example of obedience. When we are in the Messiah, we are already resting, but Messiah's rest is different from the Sabbath day of rest. Kasi pinagpapareho nila, pag nasa Messiah ka na raw, nasa-rest ka na rin. No. Because Sabbath day is a Sabbath day of rest. It's a completion of the week. Iba yun. But you know, the Sabbath was the foreshadow. The rest on Sabbath was to foreshadow our eternal rest in Messiah. Pino-foreshadow lang niya. So Israel refused to trust in God when He told them to go up and take the land. As a result, they failed to enter into His rest. That means He failed to His provision of rest. Sabbath is a tangible symbol of our willingness to trust God. Sabbath is a means of practicing our reliance upon God. That means when you rest on the Sabbath, you don't rely on yourself. You don't rely on your ability to create more wealth. Your trust in accumulating wealth depends on God because you're resting in the Sabbath. And that is the purpose of the Sabbath. May you rely on God's abilities to supply all your needs and to give you wealth. Sabbath is sanctified by God, whether man sanctifies it or not. So the question is whether we will enter into His rest or into His Sabbath. And that is the question. So the Sabbath constantly reminds us that our salvation is not based upon our work, but upon Adonai's work, who finished His work for us and rested. Yeshua honored and kept the Sabbath. As a believer and a follower of Yeshua, we must follow our Savior, our Master. Because in Luke chapter 4, verse 16, He came to Nazareth, where He had been brought up, and as His custom, meaning kinaugalan niya, He went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and stood up to read. At ano yung binabasa niya? The Torah. So, Sabbath is the life of the Messiah, Yeshua. Sabbath is God's rest. He studied the Torah every Sabbath. He read the Torah as a sign of His service to God. So, every Sabbath, He was in the synagogue as His custom. Do you want to follow Yeshua? Keep the Sabbath, because if you have faith, if you claim to have faith, but without the Sabbath, that is not true faith. That is a fake faith. So we need to keep His command, and we must follow Him. Shalom. Shalom. Shalom.